I'm here with Ed O'Keefe, political correspondent for CBS News. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be with you.
Now, let's talk about the campaigns. What are you noticing about how they're handling Nevada differently from, let's say, New Hampshire and Iowa?
I think the most distinct example is Bernie Sanders, who, given the fact that he ran 4 years ago, probably has a better handle on how to do this, but has been doing a lot of micro-targeting, especially of this region's Latino community. He'd actually done it in Iowa, a place that you don't necessarily think of as a major Latino center of potential voters, but there are a large number of them in Des Moines and in eastern Iowa and the agricultural parts of the state. And they very successfully drew out people in those parts of Iowa, knowing that if it worked there, it was going to work on an even bigger scale here, especially in East Las Vegas and other parts of southern Nevada. And they hope to do it again in California. So if you see big turnout among Hispanic voters across Nevada tomorrow, most of that is probably because of the outreach that the Sanders campaign has been doing for the last several months, not just in the last few weeks, as has been the case for some campaigns, but for several months.
What about the culinary union?
The fact that they once again stayed out of things is a victory for Sanders, because obviously, and I know it's been well reported around here, the fact that they were concerned about his Medicare for All proposal and made very clear that they had issues with it could have been a real problem for him, given how many people are either members of the union or are married to, related to, live next to somebody who is a member of the union. But, you know, I think what it has done more than anything is forced Sanders and to some extent Elizabeth Warren, who has a similar plan, to better explain how exactly a transition to that kind of a program would work. Whether that's been enough to convince union voters that it's a program they should ultimately embrace remains to be seen. But it was the first real example of a union stepping in and saying, hold on a second, this isn't necessarily good for everybody.
What do you think about Michael Bloomberg's strategy here?
Well, the most interesting part of his strategy is what he's just done with the president's visit, by buying billboards around town that essentially try to troll the president as he heads to his rally and leaves town and, you know, has spent the last few days here. And it's a reminder to all Democrats that, look, the ultimate goal for them is to defeat the president, not to be fighting amongst themselves. They have to do some of that, obviously, to figure out who's their nominee. But the fact that he, for now at least, has bypassed the state, you know, remains to be seen whether that works, and we won't know until Super Tuesday, when he either finds himself several hundred delegates across 14 states or doesn't.
Nevada Democrats had to switch gears quickly after what happened in Iowa. They were going to use that same app, which failed. Looking at what they are planning on doing now with the iPads, with the Google form, with the caucus calculator, what do you think?
I will be very curious to see how error-free the process is. I think one thing that Iowa Democrats forgot, that may or may not be the case in Nevada, is that while there are many people these days who use iPads and Google Docs as part of their job and part of their everyday life, there are still a large number of people who don't. And they are predominantly older people who ultimately are the kinds of people that show up to volunteer to help run these kinds of events. And so while the Democratic Party can say that it held dozens of training programs across the state in the last several weeks for this, again, let's see whether this system works.
The DNC says they are working closely with Nevada Democrats, but the answer we haven't received is how closely were they working with Iowa Democrats? Did the DNC really get off the hook and throw Iowa Democrats under the bus?
There's some that say that, certainly, and some DNC officials say, look, what we were most concerned with was the security aspects, whether or not the system could get hacked, whether or not someone could try to infiltrate the system with bad data that suggests a different result. Given what happened in 2016, that is a primary concern. And it is one of the few things that they really are supposed to do, is sort of serve as the umpire and make sure that the system is running smoothly. I think if Nevada goes well, there will be less scrutiny on the DNC itself over how this goes, and it'll prove that it was an isolated situation in Iowa. But if there are similar problems here in Nevada, not only will there be big questions for the Democratic National Committee, there probably will be big questions about whether using a caucus system at all makes sense going forward.
Thank you so much for joining us. All eyes on Nevada.